Comedy. It's now time for Let's Just Say. Get up your host, Natalie Walker!
I have to lower this. Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Tonight is an exciting night. This is Let's Just Say, which is a monthly storytelling event held here at Go Comedy. And we have some brave souls that are going to tell you some stories tonight. Before we start, I want to know, how many people, is this your first time here at Let's Just Say? Please clap loudly. That is so exciting. I appreciate so much that you folks are here because we've got these storytellers that are going to brave their souls. So be nice and be kind. So the theme tonight, in case you're not aware, is called Detour. So that means that our storytellers are going to tell us a story about where life, or maybe a road trip, or what have you, don't know all the stories, are going to give you an idea of something that happened. So I'm super excited about the theme. You should know that we have this every month, and so if you enjoy, you can be a storyteller, so you can reach me after the show about that, or you can also, come back. We want that to happen too. Okay, so please make sure you have your drinks ready to go, and I would like to also start off, so just to get our storytellers a little warmed up, I'll tell a brief story. I do have two audience members in this room that know the story very well, and that would be my mom and sister who are here. So I'm excited to tell you this story. It's also very embarrassing to me. So you should all know that when I first started driving, I was terrible. I was scared, I was freaked out. I had a dad who yelled at me a lot, so I equated that with the driving and the badness, and so I tried to avoid driving as much as possible. I was also one of the youngest amongst my friend group, so I was really great because people would still drive me around. And so when I first started driving, I kind of had, let's just say, accidents. Like, for example, my best friend's mailbox, it didn't make it. What else? I hit a couple of curves. Okay, a lot of curves that my dad didn't know about. And then the one that really, so I tried to go to my sister and my mom. My parents were divorced. And I tried to go to my sister and mom and say, okay, I need your help. I'm super scared. I need some help with this. And so we decided to go driving in the country. My mom lives in the country, and so we were driving, and my sister started to take me. And something happened in my brain where I got a little frozen up, and I got confused between the gas and the brakes. So when I should have hit the brakes, I hit the gas, and we ended up in a field. Picture it, some sort of, which one is it? The Lumina, the sedan, the Beretta? It wasn't a big car. It should not have been in a field. It was not, think Ford first, it was not a four-wheel drive car. So let's just say my detour was that I ended up in a field. But I'm glad to tell you now, I have a clean driving record, knock on wood, and I haven't gotten a ticket in a while, and I haven't hit any curbs. Of course, I hope that doesn't jinx me tonight. Anyway, you guys want to hear more about me. We want to welcome these brave storytellers tonight. So the first one we're going to introduce, get drum roll please. We have a long-term Ohioan improviser. Josh Keaton would like for me to tell you that he's also part of a improv troupe called Seriously It Doesn't Matter. And you can catch him at the Unfiltered Improv Radio on Toledo's Homegrown Creatives. And he's told many a story, let's just say. So I'm so excited to hear what he has to say tonight. So let's give a warm welcome to Josh.
Hi, good to be here. So, when I was in high school, I remember reading Dante's Inferno. If you've ever read this, it begins midway through life's journey. I found myself in a dark wood, the straightforward path lost. And there was something about those lines that always stayed with me. I always thought that was a great image, but it wasn't until I had gotten to my midway point in my life, or past that midway point perhaps, fingers crossed not, that I realized that I had too found myself in that dark wood, lost, path gone, and it was the best thing that could have ever happened to me. So if you go back in time 10 years, some of you will be very young, some of you less so, but if we go back in time 10 years, I was married, I was teaching high school, and I kind of thought, I'm going to be doing these things forever, right? Till I die. I'll drop dead in my classroom one day, at the side of my wife, kids nearby. This is what I'm going to do. And within a year and a half, I was divorced. I wasn't teaching any longer, and I thought I was a failure. I thought I had failed at life. When I was growing up, I was very close with my father. We were very similar. He was a really sensitive guy. I was a really sensitive kid. You can picture me on the steps of Roosevelt Elementary in 3rd grade with my little tape recorder by my side, playing the soundtrack to the Muppet movie over and over again, singing along with the other sensitive little kids, right? We're all, sensitive there together on the steps. So that's the kind of kid I was. My dad was a sensitive guy. He loved music, he loved art, he loved poetry. Well, I studied English, I was a musician, I was an actor, a teacher, right? So I was like him in many ways, but that was kind of problematic. By the time I was 10, we kind of knew, my brothers and I, my family, that my dad was a failure, right? He had been an attorney, he got himself disbarred, he'd been married, my mom left him. His life never kind of really recovered from there. So all three of us, me and my 2 brothers, none of us wanted to be like my dad. We worked really hard not to be. So I was going to get myself in a relationship, and I was going to park there, and I was going to get myself in a career, and I was going to park there, and I was just going to stay there. And that's what I did. I married the first person I fell in love with, had a great relationship with. I went into teaching right out of college, and I stayed in both those things. And they were both great until they weren't, right? So the problem with marrying the first person you have a relationship with, and I apologize to any of you if you're in that relationship now here in this room, but there's that old saying, you become one of your parents and you marry the other. And in my case, it was kind of true, right? So the dynamic in my parents' relationship was that my mom always kind of wanted my dad to be a different person than he was. So I grew up thinking that if someone loved you, that meant they wanted to change you. They didn't really like you that much who you are, but they saw you were a fixer-upper. And they saw potential in you. You could really make something out of this guy if only he would get with the program. And my ex-wife was a lovely human being, a great mother, a great teacher, but I was never quite what she wanted. Right? And I didn't really think of it that way. Maybe in the back of my head a little bit every once in a while. But I stayed with it out of fear that no one else would ever love me, right? That I was a fixer-upper, that I needed some fixing up. I don't think I was changing that much, but the potential was there, theoretically. Right? Like that old house, you really mean to put the work into. That was me. And then the problem, or the good thing, or both, about teaching as a career is teaching is wonderful, it gives you purpose, it gives you value, but it can eat your life. Right? It can take every ounce of energy you got. Now I'm sitting and looking at the room and thinking, oh my God, there's someone here in that relationship who's a teacher, and I'm really I'm bringing them down right now. And if that's you, again, I'm sorry. But teaching ate my life. Right? I was an English teacher, that's the worst kind of teacher to be. Half teachers go home and they golf around, or they do improvements to their house, or they, have their second job slinging pizzas, or whatever they do. The English teachers go home and we grade. And we hate ourselves and the grading while we're doing it. So, but the teaching ate my life, and I was in a marriage that wasn't that great to begin with. And one day, especially when you got young kids and you're spending all your time parenting and teaching, and then you haven't dedicated any time to your relationship or even to yourself, so you wake up when your kids are maybe late elementary, middle school age, and you look at the person next to you and you're like, who the hell are you? And they look at you and they're like, who the hell are you? And then you look in the mirror and you're like, who's that guy? We got nothing. But my now ex-wife did that looking in the mirror, did that looking at me, and said, no, this is not where I want to be. And now I credit her for that, but at the time I was not happy. Right? So we're getting divorced, and I thought I would just devote all my time and energy to teaching to my kids. I could put my own shit aside for now. I didn't need to. I could just be a kind of human robot. And it turns out that doesn't work. That we are actually human, and you have to take care of your mental health and stuff. And I was already very burnt out on teaching, and I needed to leave teaching. And I left teaching behind, and I had left teaching, and I had left my marriage behind, and there it was. I was in Dante's Inferno, right? I was in hell. And if you've read Dante's, the whole thing, right? He goes to hell, and then he goes to purgatory, and he goes to heaven. And I guess what I would say is it turns out they're all the same place, right? You go through that, and you've left this stuff behind, and you think you're in hell. You think you failed. That's what I thought I had done. I thought I failed. But it turned out that now that I wasn't teaching, I actually, I could do other things for a living that didn't take every moment of my life. And I could take care of myself. I could get a little healthier physically and mentally and emotionally. And then I started dating, and I had this weird experience. I would go on dates with people, and they just seemed to like me. As I was. They didn't feel like they needed to change me at all. And that was such a novelty, and it was really weird. But I grew to like it. And it turns out that's a good thing. So you should have that feeling, all of you. If you're on a date in the room tonight, you should feel that way. If you don't, maybe, don't leave now. After the story's over. Anyway, so it turns out that I went to hell, and I went to purgatory, and now I'm feeling, kind of heavenly, all in the same place. I'm not a teacher anymore, and I'm not married, but I'm in a relationship, and I am working in education, and it's all good. And so here's what I would say to you. If you haven't gotten really lost in a dark wood in your life, maybe it's time to start wandering. Thank you.
That was awesome, Josh. One more time for Josh. I will say, though, I don't always agree with the opinions of my storytellers. I like English teachers. They're great. Also, did you notice he made a very literary choice in his allegory about Dante's Inferno? So obviously, English teaching can't be that bad, and now we all want to read the book. Thank you so much. Okay, so let's give it up for the next one. Hold on. Okay, our next storyteller has been featured at The Moth, also at the Secret Society of Twisted Storytellers, and runs monthly comedy shows at the Wholehearted Winery. Okay, comedy and wine, that sounds a great time. Okay, let's see how her sense of direction is when she gives us a story about Detour, and I would like us to welcome Sarah Young.
I've been creative my entire life. I told stories, I wrote stories before I knew how to hold a pen. I would give my mom the words and she wrote them down. I painted, photography, I created recipes, I etched glass and wood. But how do you do these things and be an adult? These are not things that make a job, make a career, right? So all of this became a really expensive hobby, and my resume reads something like this: Kmart, out of business. Arbor Drugs, bought out by CVS. Napo's Wallpaper and Window Treatments, a 13-store chain in Detroit, out of business. Wiseman Electric, out of business. American Blinds, out of business. So, yeah, I'm Typhoid Mary. And trying to do these art shows on the weekend, which is how I fulfilled what I wanted to be doing, and retail just doesn't blend. So rather than following what the world wanted me to do, I made a detour and I went into logistics, OEM, aftermarket, car parts, and my world revolved around metrics. And that's a lot worse than it sounds. I still can't tell you what the crap a metric is. But the detours that I was forcing myself to take became more dire. My first stop in the world of logistics, a month into being hired, I got appendicitis and I missed a month of work. And then that transitioned, and in my next stop, after 1 week at my next stop, I broke my arm over the weekend, and I had to have my dad drive me there for 2 months And it's really hard to be dignified when your dad drops you off by the door where everyone goes out to smoke and yells out the window, "Goodbye, dear, have a great day, make good choices." They loved him. They thought he was hilarious. My next stop after that in the world of logistics, I wound up breaking my knee by rolling my bicycle, and when I landed, my leg was bent the wrong direction, and it looked really angry. So I made it straight, and then I called for help. and just as a side note, the EMT got there and they said, "Do you want to try to stand on that?" And I'm like, "Oh no, I'm pretty sure that this is not going to be walked on for a while." And I made it through there, and in my lap, but see the progression of me making my own detours and fighting the world were getting more and more dire, and I really hated that particular job, but I was afraid to move because I figured I'd get decapitated, because that seemed like the next step on how bad things could get. But they decided that they didn't need me, and so it wasn't my choice this time. And my last stop, it was so bad, I had a letter from my doctor saying I had chronic fatigue, and if they found me asleep, they couldn't fire me, which is crazy. So I was allowed to sleep whenever I wanted to, because I was trying to hide from the world I was in. And through all this, I was trying to do the artwork and what I really wanted to do on the side. And I was at that last stop for about a year, and it was right before Christmas, and I had made etched tumblers for everybody on my team. And a friend of mine came up and said, "Sarah, can you etch wood and plastic and metal?" And I'm like, I can. That's what you're holding in your hand right now. And he says, "Well, why aren't you doing custom gun stocks?" And I thought, why aren't I doing custom gun stocks? Because that sounds like a hell of a lot more fun than what I'm doing when I don't even know what the hell I'm doing. And not an hour later, my contract house showed up, and I was supposed to be hired in right after the new year. And my contract showed up and said they decided to not sign your contract. And I said, "That's okay, I have a plan." And they said, "Well, in a month, if something comes up, you don't have to go through drug testing." And what? I said, no, I have a plan. And I took a leap of faith, and I stopped making my own detours. And for the last 6 years, I have been a laser artist, a recipe creator, an author, a stand-up comic, and a storyteller. Thank you.
Woohoo, that was a beautiful story. I also, not to ever discredit a diagnosis, but I also would like to institute sleeping and not being fired for it. No one from my work is here, right? Okay. All right, next up. Okay, no pressure. Kevin actually teaches storytelling workshops, so no pressure. They are a playwright living in Detroit by way of Los Angeles. They study sketch writing at the Planet Amp and is a proud graduate. This is a legitimate thing. The Clown School of LA. Please, let's give a warm welcome to Kevin.
I do want to corroborate, teaching English sucks. Driving with a cat is like a race against time. Me and my girlfriend finished the first leg of our move from Los Angeles to Detroit in Cedar City, Utah, and our senior cat, Mystery, made it very clear that she did not like car rides. You could probably hear her yowling from the other side of the freeway as we passed by, like a Doppler effect kind of thing. We tried to prepare for this beforehand by getting anxiety medication from the vet, but it clearly did not work this time around. Mystery was seemingly immune to Xanax. What did calm her down was the warm refuge of a Motel 6 room, but this was the first leg of our move, and we had 3 more driving days to Detroit. Our next stop was in Denver, which is a pretty straight shot from Cedar City. You take the 15 north until you hit the 70, then you go east to Denver. Unless, of course, there is a wildfire that closes down a stretch of the 70 at, say, Glenwood Springs. What was going to be a 3-hour drive from Glenwood to Denver turned into a 7-hour detour through the Rockies with an incredibly anxious senior cat. Lucky for us, when traffic was redirected, her Xanax started to kick in. But the drive wouldn't be on a smooth interstate anymore. No, our route was anywhere from 1 to 2 lanes with sheer cliffs on either side. Mystery would, it was only a matter of time of when Mystery would wake up, and we hoped it would be closer to Denver. The thing about the Rockies is that they are so frustratingly beautiful that we just had to stop and take pictures anywhere we can. At Aspen, absolutely. Driving up a switchback and there's like a turnoff. Sign me up. I brought my camera for a reason. But at every stop, the clock kept ticking, and the sun kept setting. We did eventually make it through the Rockies. It was quite beautiful, with a good hour left to Denver, but Mystery was starting to wake up. And she was ready to share her every thought. It was all downhill from here. Literally, we were driving down a mountain and into Denver. The skyline came into view, and we finally got our cell coverage back. A family friend let us stay in their condo for the night. A bit of a step up from a Motel 6 room, but Mystery loved it all the same. Of course, the hard part of the move wasn't done yet. We still had to drive through Nebraska, and I don't think any of us liked that.
I have a question for you. Did you be tempted to take the kitty Xanax? Because I would have after.
I was in a completely different car. I was driving behind the car that Mystery was in.
Oh, you hear that? He was behind the car, so
Yep.
Mystery had her own situation going on.
Yeah, she did.
I still want to take the kitty Xanax. Anyway, okay. Thank you so much, Kevin. Yay! Okay. Do you know that we're almost halfway through? Isn't that crazy? Okay. If you were to look up the definition of storytelling, this storyteller's name should be right next to it in the dictionary because he has performed all over the place, has won countless of times at the Moth, and can evoke emotions every time he tells a story. He has lived a fascinating life, and so I cannot wait to hear his next story. Let's give it up for Maxie Jones!
Hello.
Oh, that's going to be fun too. Yeah.
How's everybody doing today? So, about 30 years ago, I was an English teacher. In my high school alma mater in the Bronx, New York. Now, it was my alma mater, and I still lived in the building that I grew up in. And it was walking distance from my apartment. So a lot of times when I'm walking around the school, some of the kids might walk up to me and say, "Hey, Mr. Jones, what's up?" Because they knew me from around the way. And quite often when I'm in the neighborhood, I might be sitting on the bench, playing basketball with my friends, doing whatever, and parents would pass by with the kids, and the kids would be like, "That's my teacher, that's Mr. Jones." And the parents would tell me, "Oh, thank you, Mr. Jones, I hear so much about you, you know. And it was what I lived for. I loved it. But of course, you know, when you live in the same neighborhood with the kids, there are certain things you can't do seen doing. So like when my friends would break out the 40 ounces, I would have to leave. Now here's the thing, when you're an African-American male and you're a teacher, we're so rare, if I'm not mistaken, it's like 2%. We're so rare that it's never just about teaching the subject. It's always about, in the process of teaching the subject, you're also setting an example for the youth of the neighborhood to let them know that they could grow up to be good influences in the neighborhood as well. And so that was what I found myself doing. And I love, like I said, I love doing it. Now, of course, the shortage of African-American male teachers goes far beyond the Bronx, New York. So it wasn't long before a friend of mine who taught in a suburb of New York came to me and said, hey, Maxie, you know, we really could use a black male teacher up here in Rockland County. And you know, there are a lot of black boys who need it. And you know, I was like, you know, I'm fine right here. She was like, they're paying a lot of money. Okay, let's talk about it. So she set me up with the human resources, and they set me up with an interview. So I'm thinking that I would go up there to Rockland County to the school and interview, but instead the guy said, you know, they're going to be holding a job fair right in Manhattan this Saturday, and we're going to be there. Since you live right in New York, why don't you just come to that job fair? It starts at 10, we interview you at 10. I said, okay, sounds good. So I get down there Saturday morning to this job fair, and I go in and I see it's an education fair for teachers of color. I didn't think anything of it. I just went, I found where they were, and I went straight to their table. They gave me an interview and actually offered me a job. So I was set. So now I was leaving and headed home, and I said, what am I rushing for? This thing goes all the way till 3 o'clock or whatever. Let me walk around and check it out. So I walk around the job fair, and there's San Diego, California school district, Miami, Florida, all these wonderful places where I could go and work and teach. But you know, I wasn't really looking for a job, so I was just checking them out. Then after a while, I was leaving. And as I was leaving, this man walks up to me and says, hey, excuse me, can I have a few minutes of your time? And I said, sure. But of course, I'm not looking for a job. You ever just blow a job interview on purpose? I said, where you from, man? He said, we're from a city called Hopkins in Minnesota. And I said, dude, where the fuck is Minnesota? Because, you know, when you're from New York, there's only like New York, Chicago, you know. So he says, I'll tell you what, why don't you come with me over to our table and I'll show you where Minnesota is. So he shows me where it is on the map. I was like, all right. Now I'm really trying to blow it. So I was like, hey, are there any black people there? I don't want to be the first black guy in Hopkins, Minnesota. He goes, no, man, there are a few. And I could see he took it as a challenge. He said, I'll tell you what. How about if we send you a plane ticket? And you come and spend a weekend. And we'll show you around, we'll interview you. And hey, if you decide not to take the job, then at least you've been somewhere you never thought you'd go. I was like, fine, I'll visit Minnesota. And I walked away in my mind thinking, hey, if these guys want to waste their money giving me a trip to Minnesota, sure, I'll take it. So my intention was to go to Minnesota, come home and say, hey, guess what? I've been to Minnesota. But that guy had a whole different plan for me. See, first of all, this interview was like in March or April. He didn't send me a plane ticket till like June. Because because you know Minnesota. They sent me a plane ticket for June. It was Father's Day weekend. That was the first thing they did. The second thing, they dropped me at the hotel and said, one of our staff members is going to come pick you up and show you around. I said, okay. So I'm sitting in the lobby, waiting, and while I'm waiting for the staff member, I see this other lady drive up in this nice car. She gets out. I was like, damn, she's fine. Who is that? She gets out, she comes to the lobby and says, Maxie Jones? I was like, oh, shit. They set me up with her. So she picks me up, drives me around. We ended up doing a lot. We went to the movies, we went to dinner. We just had a blast. The next day, you know what the next day was? Juneteenth. Now, I never heard of Juneteenth. I was from New York. We didn't celebrate Juneteenth. But listen, that weekend, there were black people everywhere in Minnesota. Everywhere I looked. So I was like, all right. So the next day I had my interview. The interview went very well. And they offered me the job, and they even offered me a scholarship to the University of Minnesota. So by the time it was over with, everything I saw, I was like, hell yeah, I'll take the job. So next thing you know, there I am in cold-ass Minnesota, teaching a classroom full of not one black kid. A friend of mine said, dude, what happened to the whole setting an example or whatever? I was like, yeah, whatever, I forget about it. So I'm there in Minnesota, and you know, it didn't take long before I realized this right here. As much as black and Hispanic kids in the Bronx need to see a black man in front of the classroom so they can see that they can do it too, upper middle class white kids in Minnesota needed to see that too, because they didn't think I belonged there either. So I stayed there for 2 years before I got homesick. And I came on back home, went back home to New York. And wound up right back in the Bronx teaching the kids in my community again. So a couple of my friends were like, damn man, but that was like a waste of 2 years. You went to Minnesota. And no, it was not a waste of 2 years. Because when I was teaching them black and Hispanic kids in the Bronx, I'm thinking that they're limited and that they need to see what their possibilities were. But I didn't realize that I was limited. And I didn't realize that I had something that I could teach to anybody. Thank you very much.
Not only is he an amazing storyteller, but he also adjusted this for me. Thank you so much. My goodness, this is why I love this event so much, and this is why I'm so happy that all of you are here to experience it, because we've been able to hear some amazing stories, and it's just really powerful to hear everyone's different perspectives and how they take a theme. And so I just want to recognize all of you again in the audience, as well as all of our amazing storytellers braving their souls tonight. Thank you so much. Woo! I want us to clap so loudly for this next storyteller. This next storyteller is making their inaugural debut on the stage tonight, telling their first story here. And I know what that feels like to ever have telling your first improv set or your first storytelling. It's a big moment. And so I want to make sure that we are clapping so loudly that Pete is going to tell me to be quiet. Okay, so, all right. So Finn was born in Ann Arbor and lived in Colorado for 21 years and found their way back to Michigan and have been performing in stand-up comedy in the Detroit area. Tonight, again, is their first time on the storytelling stage, so please give a very large and warm welcome to Finn.
I did bring my, I brought my training wheels just in case. I've been doing stand-up briefly. I don't know how to do this actually. All right, we're doing
Next.
We're doing nailed it. I don't know what height you need. Okay, we're good on it. Thank you, Natalie, for trying to capture the terror that's feeling. So, thank you. I do well in prompting and direction. Better? I like structure. Okay, so I feel like I have had a number of detours in my life. It's hard to pick just one. Some of them maybe were more of like a gentle meandering, and others like full-on detour. The first one came early, very early, 43 years ago, 6 weeks old. My preordained destiny in life was to die in early infancy. I had a birth defect, not like major, you know, if I'd been born 100 years ago, I wouldn't be here. The valve that goes between your small intestine and your stomach, mine really felt that its calling in life was to be a door, which meant that I couldn't get food and nutrition in, so I'm just vomiting. And the doctors did not believe my mom. You know, peddler stenosis only occurs in boys, and send her home, you're a new mother. You don't know what you're talking about. My mom brought me home to Halifax, and pour one out for this gentleman on the plane. I was projectile vomiting, right? So I'm on an airplane. Some poor gentleman got nailed like 4 seats back, 4 rows back. You know, and a moment's silence. You know. You know, I mean, I still think about that every time I get on a plane. Like, you're sitting there, you're doing your thing with the pee, and then boom, nail out of nowhere. You know, wow, feel bad about that. My mom's doctor in Halifax, her pediatrician, took a look at me and was like, this is bad. She needs surgery now. And so I had emergency surgery at 6 weeks, opened up the door into a valve, and I was given a chance at living. So I'm going to consider that a detour from my destiny to not be here. It's funny. Ironically, honestly, I've spent most of my life being suicidal, so I used to resent that a lot. I was this close to not having to deal with any of this, you know? So actually, it was fun, the clapping. I was like, well, I don't be now. I didn't clap. No clap. There were no claps from me for a long time. Anyhow, the next one, fast forward, I was 9, 10 years old in my room, attempting to fall asleep, and my parents were fighting big time. It was bad. It was real bad. That's not new. My younger brother would always go and spy on their fights. I had heard of them before. I was just trying to do my thing, vibing in my room with the chaos. And my brother would come in and give me updates on their fights. And he came in one night and told me that mom and dad are getting divorced, and that mom is giving us up for adoption. And I was like, I hadn't really thought about the word detour yet, I don't think, but I was like, I knew I needed a plan B. What's plan B? You know, I was stoked. My dad they were divorced. I was like, it's about time that man needs to go. But the adoption part caught me a little off guard. And I decided, what's plan B? I'm like, okay, I'm a nerd. I like school. The plan is to get myself through school, get to college, get a degree, and then I'll support myself. And everything will be perfect after that. Perfect. I truly believe that. I decided in that moment that was what was going to happen, and that life would be absolutely perfect after I could support myself. We didn't end up getting given up for adoption. It turns out my mother, at age 19, had a very non-consensual detour of her own, which resulted in a pregnancy and a son being born. And she did end up giving that son up for adoption. And, you know, my brother was listening to a very adult fight. And my dad is definitely the kind of man who would throw something like that in her face to suggest what a horrible mother she was. So, yeah, plan B, college. So I actually did that. So in 9th grade, my biology class, we did a unit on genetics, which I loved. Oh, dominant genes, recessive genes, codominant genes, the inheritance. I loved, I was vibing. I was like, this is lit. I love this. I want to study genetics. And so I did. I got a bachelor's degree in molecular, cellular, and developmental biology from the University of Colorado. And I put myself through school working full time because I was focused and driven that this was going to solve everything. Everything solved. No problem after that. Of course, another teacher, that's not how it worked out. And really that wasn't the right degree for me. I discovered after graduating that I was emptier than I ever had been. Nothing was solved. Everything I'd been running from and everything I had buried was right there with me. And also, I didn't particularly enjoy torturing mice for a living. Bummed me out. Real bummed me out. I'm real sensitive, and the writing on the wall was there early. Some of the more upsetting things I saw was my freshman year, but I had blinders on. I was so focused I'd get this degree so I can fix everything. And so I was really depressed and I didn't want to get out of bed because I had everything I had ever worked for and it solved nothing. I was in a relationship. I'd been in a relationship for about 5.5 years.
No, that was
Was that false?
no.
It was false.
That was being pushing a coat. I'm sorry.
Oh, cool.
Teacher, I'm sorry.
An intermission? Okay. So, yes, Eric, the Norwegian. So I'd been dating this guy for like 5.5 years. He was an exchange student at my high school from Norway. And realized like this is going to be tough, and we tried to break up, which lasted like 24 hours. And then it's like we might as well enjoy the time we have, and who knows what will happen when he has to go back to Norway. And we decided to try to stay together. This was the late 90s, we didn't have Zoom, there was no, it was like email and the occasional rather expensive phone call was our options, which is better than just letter writing or, sending a raven or, but it was tough. And I actually, when I got to Colorado, I discovered they offered Norwegian as a language, which I thought was like a sign, that we were meant to be there. And so I took Norwegian. I took 2 years of Norwegian, learned Norwegian. I went over there to study abroad for a year. I have a minor in Scandinavian studies. But, so, we got engaged on my 21st birthday, sober. That was a sober decision. And it was, then I was going to come back, and we said, okay, but we can only do 1 more year apart, because this is just kind of the worst. And started to get kind of pushed, like, we couldn't stand being apart anymore. For him to come to the United States to go to school, it's like, okay, we're going to have to get married by this day, so you get your green card by this date, because you can only afford out of state for this much time. And it was looking at, by the time he graduated with a master's, he would be looking at easily $100,000 of debt. And in Norway, it is one of those, evil socialist countries that you hear about. That is sarcasm. Where the government gives you money to go to school that you don't have to pay back. So he'd get the same degree with little to no debt. And it just started feeling rushed for the wrong reasons. And like, my dad was getting ready for a 3rd disastrous marriage, and it was just like, what's the rush, And so I decided to end that relationship, which was not easy. It wasn't like, oh, it's not working out between us. Like, no, it was great. It was logistics. And I didn't want to ask him to come here and take on that kind of debt, like when it doesn't work out, like that didn't feel the right decision. It's one of the hardest decisions I've ever had to make, and I was very aware I had significantly shifted the path of my life of like, let's get the heck out as far away from my family in Norway and live that enchanted life that, and I was now saying no to that. Right around this time, I met a gentleman who's Spanish speaking, and his English was about as good as my Spanish, and I thought that was a good fit. I really wanted to dial in my Spanish. It turned out that's a lot more useful than Norwegian. On a day-to-day basis. And so I had been coming out of this breakup, I didn't notice the red flags. Didn't notice them, they were there. Didn't notice them about how attached and controlling he was getting of me. And he would get, by the time I started to see it was too late. I employed, the normal tactics to get someone out of your life, like, hey, this isn't working out anymore, or I don't want to hang out anymore, or please don't call me anymore. No. He would just show up at my house, he would show up at my job, he would look around the campus for me, and if I had a male professor and I was staying late to talk to the professor, he would demand to know how long I'd been fucking him. In the middle of campus, making that a scene, which I was not having a good time. And it was bad, and really, it's like only a couple of weeks, it's not serious, honestly, it was ridiculous. The absurdity of it makes it funny now. It was not funny then. So, one day, I'm trying to get him out of my life, and he shows up at my place of employment. I went out to the parking lot on break, and there he was, and he told me that he had gotten in to get in the car. And honestly, I didn't believe him. I didn't think he had a gun, I really didn't. And I was so tired of this man making a scene that I got in the car. He did have a gun, it turned out. Definitely did. And he even went so far as he had like one of those red lights on it. So like they aim and there's like a red dot on whatever they're aiming at, just, to make sure. It's hard, I guess it's easy to miss when a person is like red. I don't know why I felt like that was necessary, but like an enhancement. And so now we are barreling 85 and a 35, and I'm trying to figure where my options are. Thankfully, my childhood prepared me quite well for this kind of intensity. And, the main trauma responses, fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And I'm thinking, fighting this guy, we're going 85 in the car. I'm not going to fight him, like we're going to crash the car. And I'm like, do I try to bail out of the car? We're going 85 miles an hour, that's going to end badly, right? So like, and freeze. That's not going to do me any good. Like, I got to do something. So I fawn. Fawn is one that is kind of less known. It's like people pleasing your way out of a dangerous situation. But someone else, you lose so someone else wins and you can get out of the situation. Someone tries to mug you. Hey, take my wallet, take my watch, take my phone. Go, and then so you can live and get away. That's fine. My childhood reared me to be a master fawn, which is, people pleasing my way through life is what got me in this situation, not recognizing red flags for what they were. But thankfully also knowing how to fawn very well got me out of that situation. And he was having a predicament. His predicament was whether he was going to shoot himself in front of me or shoot me first and then kill himself. And this is a major life decision. You don't want to make the wrong one. And so, it's like, in a way, there's cost-benefit analysis to be made in that circumstance. And I did manage to talk him off the ledge, and I got him to bring me back to work. I wish I could say that this was an isolated incident as far as what the people-pleasing, the scenarios that some of my people-pleasing got me into, or I did self-medicate. I started self-medicating, and like one time, I used to self-medicate with marijuana, and then I switched to alcohol, which I don't recommend. If anyone is familiar with the harm reduction model, that is going backwards. There was another detour where I woke up in jail and had no idea how I got there. And then thank you to alcohol. Anyhow, over the course of the last 20 years, I have learned how to stand up for myself, to recognize a red flag when it's there, to set boundaries, to look out for myself, to not be a pushover, which is how I lived my whole life. And I'm going to say that starting to live that way is definitely the biggest detour of them. Thank you.
And thank you for sharing your first story with us at Let's Just Say. We really do appreciate it, and we are so glad that you're here. Okay. The next storyteller might tell you that giving him an intro is that seriously it doesn't matter, because that's the name of his improv troupe. Yes, there are 2 improv troupe cohorts together here tonight. So we have 2 of them. And you may have seen him on this very stage doing improv with that troupe. And he is, as well as any other theater, Ant, Civic Theater, Toledo. I mean, there's more than one theater in Toledo. I just don't know them, so Toledo. So please, let's give a very warm welcome to Paul, who is also a first-time storyteller tonight at Let's Just Say.
Hey everybody, how's it going? Yeah, on the theme of detours, I had a pretty big detour in my life when I was 20 years old. In 1990, I broke into a bank and I was arrested. And I'm not really here to tell that story. But that was 1990, and that was a year of a lot of change for me. 6 months prior to that incident, my father passed away at the age of 62 to colon cancer. And I've actually been thinking a lot about my dad, and you know how good he was as a parent. And I'm thinking a lot about it because I have a daughter who's 17, and very soon she'll be the age that I was when my father passed away. And I've been, like I said, I've been thinking about my dad and his parenting style, his parenting choices, and really bringing to home, like, you know, how I did as a parent in the last 17 years. And I guess now I'm looking at my daughter and really trying to figure it out for myself, how do I best help my daughter. And when I think about my dad, when I think about my father, he wasn't really around a lot in the first, let's say, decade of my life. He was always working. He was an entrepreneur. He worked in real estate, and he just wasn't around a lot. So what I do remember about him was that he would, you know, come home after a day of work, and I would be watching TV, probably with my sister, who was, you know, 4 years older than me. And the first thing he'd want to do is just have us turn off the TV, and he said he just wanted peace and quiet. He didn't want to be disturbed. One of my earliest memories about my dad, and I feel like he was like, you know, this tough guy trying to impart some sort of toughness on his kids. I remember being 3 years old, and I was in some airport with my family, with my parents, and I remember seeing an escalator, maybe seeing an escalator for the first time, and I decided that it was like a ride, and I would just run up and down it, even though it's only going in one direction. And I remember tripping and really gashing up my legs on the sharp edge of the escalator, and I remember crying profusely and probably screaming like 3-year-olds would do. And what I remember that moment, my father telling me, like, I remember being grabbed, like, because I guess we were going somewhere. And, you know, I sort of messed up that plan of going somewhere. I remember him saying to me, stop crying, or I'll really give you a reason to cry. And at that moment in time, when you're 3 years old and you're crying, you're all mashed up. So like, I think this is a pretty good reason to stop. I remember my dad I remember my dad in 1976. He was one of the first owners of an Oldsmobile Delta 88. It's like this big long GM vehicle, and I remember having to sit in the back with my two sisters, be in the middle, and these were one of the first cars with air conditioning, but I don't think he turned it on all the time. And so I remember being like the smallest, maybe 5, 6, well, I was 6 years old at the time, and just being suffocated between my two sisters, and then getting into some heating contest with one of my sisters. And I just still remember my dad, his conflict resolution was to really just reach back and smack us on the head. So that's sort of what I remember about my dad. He wasn't around, and some of the only emotions that he showed was, frustrations at being a parent. And I remember growing up, and when I think about like all my activities in school, neither my dad or even my mom, participated that much in what I was doing. I was pretty independent. If I, wanted to ride my bike somewhere, I would just go and, come back for dinner. My dad was always home for dinner, and we did eat together as a family, which was nice. What I remember about that, this is what my dad told. This is a funny thing that my dad said. My mom pretty much had a set menu every week, and she was also, I'm just gonna, sorry, but I'm just gonna tell you that she was a really bad cook. She was terrible. And it was always a set menu. Monday was always pasta night, and so it was always like tube full of pasta, pasta, and she didn't even make her own spaghetti sauce. It was always ragu in a jar. I must have had that for like 6 years. Thursday nights was chicken night, and it was always shake and bake, and it was always shake and bake with the skin on. Friday was fish night. Tuesdays and Wednesdays were sort of they were sort of mixed, but it was always just something beef. But I never really liked my mom's cooking. And one time, I decided to say something about it. And I just said, this just doesn't taste good. And my father's response to that was, you know what your problem is, Paul? You've never really been hungry. He was talking about his time, back in the old country during wartime and the Depression and all that stuff. But that's what he told me. You've never been really hungry. And I'm thinking to myself, I think we're now living in the 70s and 80s where we have the choice of food to taste good. So. So my relationship with my father really got better as I became a teen. And what I will say is that we developed a relationship where we had a love for comedy, and I remember watching comedy shows late at night, 9:30, 10 o'clock at night, every night on school nights or on weekends, and we started to talk more. He would tell me more about his life before he moved to Canada. I should say I'm Canadian, originally from Canada, and I became a U.S. citizen last year. Well, this story is sort of jumping around, but I am getting to it. So our relationship got better. I'm always thinking about this in the context of how have I been as a parent to my own daughter, especially now. I think in these critical years that she's going to finish high school this year, and then she's applying to a number of different universities, and it makes me think about what I was doing when I applied for universities. And in high school, I was not in athletics at all. I was in band. I could play the French horn. I did that for many years. And I can play the piano pretty good. But some of the things that I was really good at was, science and math stuff. I was really good at that, and I thought to myself, well, what do you do when you're good at science and math? Well, the number one thing seemed to be going into engineering, so that's what I did. And I went to the University of Toronto and started out there, and quickly figured out in my first year, in my first semester, that holy crap, university is a lot harder than high school, and you actually do need to study like heck just to do everything. And I remember my first semester, my overall average was like 62. It was really horrible. My dad, and I wanted to quit, and my dad told me, he said to me, I really, you can do, I don't care what you do with your life, but just do me this favor and get your engineering degree. And just that one simple sentence, for some reason, gave me the motivation to continue. And things got better and better from there. My dad died in the summer of 1990, and he died in July. And I had just finished up my second year of engineering school. One of the things you try to do when you finish, when you're in engineering school, is you want to get a summer job in engineering. And I was waking up every day, because school had finished, I was waking up every day at like 11 o'clock, and I was not able to find a job for like 2 or 3 weeks. Nothing was cooking. My dad said to me, he just gave me some brief advice. You can't do it this way. You should get up early in the morning and just knock on doors. Wear a shirt and tie and start knocking on doors. And I literally did exactly what he told me to do. The next morning, I had the first person I talked to gave me a lead, which gave me a job. And to me, I was so amazed that the brief advice that he gave me worked out so well. And I guess what I'm trying to bring together here is to say that even though I might choose to criticize my dad for a lot of the things, or how he was, let's say, not so much involved in my life, he really helped me out just at the right moment, just before he passed away. And despite the incident with the bank, they dropped the charges, I paid my bank back. And I got better and better, and I graduated with honors, like Canadian honors. It's still technically a B here. So I graduated with honors, and I just feel like I wanted to honor my dad about talking about how he helped me in that critical moment while he was fighting cancer. And now that we're here all together in the future, and I have to also try to think about my daughter and try to help her the best way, because she's on a different path, she's on her own path. And what I'm thinking mostly is that, number one, I have to impart on her that, number one, you always have to try, and then while you're even trying, you also need to never give up, because otherwise those are the two things you need to do, I think, to succeed. And that's all I have to say about that.
So the bit that never ends. Okay. Thanks, Mom. I'm just kidding. Let's give it another warm a round of applause for Paul. Let's talk after. We have some similarities. Okay. Our next storyteller is, storytelling is how he describes his midlife crisis, and he's known as the Moth Road Trip Guy, as he's been telling stories all around the country. So please, let's give a warm welcome to Ted Olt.
So I step out of my lodge into the forest. They call it bush. It's Kangaroo Island. It's off the south coast of Australia. Now, the name makes it sound like something Disney might run, but it's wilderness. It's a national park, and that's sort of freaking me out, because on the plane ride to Australia, I read 9 out of the 10 deadliest snakes in the world are from here, and I don't do snakes well. Like, just as an example, when I was 25, I was living with a woman, and she was perfect for me, like she was, but I just couldn't wrap my brain around getting married. And she had a cat, and I hate cats, but one night I had a dream. Her cat was floating on a plank of wood in a pond full of deadly snakes, water moccasins. And I swam out, and I saved that fucking cat. And when I woke up, I realized that's my subconscious telling me I need to keep this woman in my life. Because if I were to break snakes for a cat, even in a dream, that's how much, that says a ton. And Judy and I, we've been married 30 years at the time we were in Australia. Now, we were at this lodge for 3 nights, and I'm going to run every morning. That's what I'm doing outside. But the night before, we checked into the lodge, and I'm asking the guide, I said, what's the snake situation? And he says, well, the only thing you got to worry about is the tiger snake. It's the 3rd deadliest snake in the world, which is enough to worry about. Right. He says, everywhere else, it's black with orange stripes, tiger. But on the island, the orange has evolved away. It's a plain black snake. Don't worry, it's too hot out. You won't see one. This was March. It's the height of the summer. And he says, even if you did see one, it's going to take off. They're very, very shy. So I'm going to run. There's a road that goes from the lodge down through the forest, heavy forest, to a highway a couple miles away. I'm going to run down to the highway and back each morning. And I put on my iPod shuffle, and I start running. But it's 100 degrees out, and shuffles die above 95. So I've maybe gone a half a mile, and my music just dies. And right away, I realized the music had been distracting me from my very, very important paranoia. Because all of the trees had black bark. And that meant a tiger snake on this road is going to look a whole lot like these sticks that are all over the road. Now, you might think, okay, if you really are afraid of snakes, I would just go back in the lodge. But if I don't run every day, I'm a mess. It's more mental than physical. So I knew I was going to run, but the trade-off I made is I did not get within 20 yards of a stick until I knew that's what it was. And it slowed me down a bit, but there was no way around it. And I didn't see a snake. It was 100 degrees out. That night, we went for a safari out in the forest. They were looking for koala bears. And there's like 10 of us, and we've got a guide, and we've all got flashlights. The others are walking around, shining their lights up on the trees, looking for koala bears. I'm looking at the ground. But I want to see koala bears. There's no way in the world I'm stepping on sticks without looking at them. And I warn the others, and they look at me like I'm nuts. Even Judy, she looked at me like I was crazy. And we saw koala bears. It was too hot. We didn't see any snakes. The next day, it's 100 degrees again, and I'm getting cocky. I'm like, I'm just going to check the sticks out 10 yards ahead. And I do that, and I'm able to run a little bit faster, and I don't see a snake. It's 100 degrees out. The last morning, we're going to be there. A thunderstorm comes through, booming thunderstorm. The temperature drops 30 degrees, and I go out for my run, and I get to that highway, and I turn around, and I'm coming back. I'm maybe a half mile from the lodge, and here comes Judy out for an exercise walk. She walks most days, but the first 2 days are too hot, so she's really, wanting to get a workout in. And now, I'd been married 30 years at the time, but guys, you still have to impress, right? So I stand up a little bit straighter, and so that I can run faster, I'm only checking out the sticks 5 yards ahead of me, and she's got headphones on, she's jamming to something, so we just wave when we go by. I'm 100 yards past her, I'm on the right-hand side of the road, 5 yards ahead of me, on the left-hand side of the road, a 7-foot-long stick starts to slither across the road, and I freeze. And if I hadn't froze, that snake and I would have met right there. Right fucking there. The snake got there, and the snake stopped, and it's looking at me, and I'm saying, I think to myself, you're supposed to take off. Because it didn't. It just stayed there, and it's staring at me, and I'm thinking, maybe this one's got anger issues. And every drop of courage, any drop of pride, it all went away. I was a hollow shell. I had to pee really bad. And I'm just frozen, and eventually the snake, on its own time, goes off into the forest. And I go to the far side of the road, and I'm starting to run back in towards the lodge, but I'm looking over my shoulder because I'm thinking this thing's coming back after me. But then I'm thinking, there's more than one snake out here. So now I'm looking ahead, and I'm looking to the sides, and I'm looking back. It was horrible, but I finally get to the lodge. And I got my hand on the door, and this is the kind of place, it's like all-inclusive liquor, you know, and like there's a bar, help yourself bar in the lobby, and I can see a big bottle of vodka sitting right in there, and I'm thinking, my direction is toward that, and a Bloody Mary to get me through this, and I'm opening the door, and something inside me, maybe like the last number of my courage, said, no, we gotta go warn Judy. She doesn't think the sticks can be snakes, and she's distracted by music. We gotta go warn her. No, that snake's in the forest. You yourself were worried about other snakes. Gotta go warn her. I'm sure she's almost back. I can see a mile down the road. I don't see her. I don't want to go back out. You like to talk, and you're going to want to talk about seeing the snake. And when she hears this, if you haven't warned her, she's going to know she's married to a coward. Shit. And I turned around, and I started running back to save the love of my life. But trust me, I was checking out the sticks 30 yards ahead. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ted. Snakes, okay. Yeah, I'm so glad that we're inside, and I'm gonna have nightmares, but thank you, Ted, thank you so much. I'm just kidding. It was a beautiful story. Okay, so the next storyteller, by the way, are we all having fun? I hope you are enjoying as much as I am. We only have 2 storytellers left. Sad. It is sad. I actually was just going to say to you, if you folks are enjoying your time, we do have another storytelling event in February. It's going to be February 16th. And the theme for that is called Smitten. So, all the Valentines and all those things, you can do that. Also, we have another one coming up for March for home, and we're looking for storytellers. Just to let you know. I tell you this now because I'm going to forget after the 2 storytellers, so I want to tell you ahead of time. Okay. So we have a long-term filmmaker, writer, artist, fan favorite of Let's Just Say. Terrence has a monthly show on YouTube, and tonight he's going to razzle and dazzle us with another story. Please, let's give a round of applause for Terrence.
Your intro was very nicer than mine. In the year of our Lord 2000, I attended an open house for the Motion Picture Institute of Michigan, the film school I was planning to attend after graduating high school. In 2001, I graduated from said high school, and in 2002, I actually got around to mailing in my application. I even got an acceptance letter back. Finally, in 2004, I began attending the one-year program that I could have completed 3 times by then. I found almost all of the classes interesting and informative, but the one exception was the screenwriting course. I'm not a writer, and I didn't aspire to become one, but passing was a requirement for completing the program, and writing a short narrative screenplay was a requirement for passing the class. Thankfully, I was eventually struck with enough inspiration to crank out one such script. It was titled D'Ambulance, and its plot isn't super relevant to the story I'm telling now, but just for context, it's about two paramedics who believe God has instructed them to allow certain people to die in their care, so that organs can be donated to more worthy persons. As a non-writer, I was actually pretty proud of the finished product. I even thought if I could get a budget together, it would make for a really good first post-film school project. I figured it was at least an A-worthy script, maybe B+. My screenwriting teacher felt it was more like a C, so I guess what do I know about screenwriting? I'm not the one who wrote the Schwarzenegger and Sinbad surprise holiday hit film Jingle All the Way. And according to one federal judge, neither was my screenwriting teacher. Moving on. I completed film school and moved here to Michigan in order to take advantage of the film tax incentives bringing productions to the area and to work with the contacts I made in film school. That script always stuck around in my head though. I really believed it had potential. Every so often I would pull it out, make some changes, or have another screenwriter give it a once-over, and it seemed to be getting better with each draft. I even had some paramedic friends read it to try and ensure that it was somewhat realistic. That resulted in one friend's mom throwing it away before finishing the first page. I probably didn't need to make the first line of the script a Holocaust denial reference, but it was only 15 pages, and I wanted to establish the antagonist right away. In 2008, I decided the time had come to make my grand cinematic statement and film this thing. The first thing I had to secure was an ambulance. Thankfully, my parents actually liked the script and supported my filming of it, and so they convinced a friend who owned a paramedic service to let me use one of their units for a day. What I thought would be the biggest obstacle turned out to be the easiest part. Next, I needed a cast. Since the ambulance was in Ohio, I would have to film there, and so I created a Craigslist ad and rented a room at the library in my hometown to hold auditions for the two main roles. I received several emails and booked the appointments and even scheduled a photo shoot for some images I would need on some props. I drove to Ohio that day and waited. Waited and waited. Eventually, one person showed up. And honestly, his audition wasn't great. The photo shoot was a bit of a bust too, with nothing turning out how I was imagining it. So, I canceled the shoot and moved the script to the back of my mind again. A couple of years later, I tried again using the same setup as the first time. This time, absolutely nobody showed up to the audition. And again, my film was dead before it began. Finally, in 2012, I scrapped all of my old plans and started with a new approach. This time, I would try to shoot it here, where I actually knew actors and filmmakers and had my own connections for an ambulance and filming locations. This time, it actually worked. I filmed D'Ambulance. Now, I just had to send it out into the world and my real film career could begin. I wanted to make the very first screening to be a special one, so I put it in the lineup to play at a fundraiser film screening / concert for the film festival I had also co-founded, which was debuting that year. Everything was coming together very nicely until it didn't. Just like with my auditions in Ohio, not one soul showed up for our fundraiser. The owner of the venue even revoked his donation of the space and said we had to pay him after all. Even though he was one of the stars of my film. We had held a fundraiser, and when it was over, we had less funds than we had started. D'Ambulance did eventually play some film festivals with audiences in attendance. It even won an award for Best Drama at one, despite one audience member laughing hysterically through portions of it. But these were small local film festivals that I had pre-existing connections with. I still believed in the film and its potential for being my big break. Then it finally happened. D'Ambulance was accepted into the Buffalo Niagara Film Festival in Buffalo, New York. This was a festival I had heard of, a festival which had screened some films I had actually seen, and a festival which had a roster of celebrities among its previous attendees. At least, the website presented it that way. So I was determined to be there for the screening. I was going to meet the industry professionals in attendance and finally start making the necessary connections to start getting my film work outside of my little bubble here in Michigan. I was so excited and nervous about this opportunity that when I was interrogated at the border to cross into Canada for the first time in my life, I had to correct my answers to more than one question, prompting the guard to really take his time on allowing me through. But I did eventually make it and arrived in Buffalo at the theater where the festival was happening. I was ready for a grand celebration of cinema with spotlights, red carpet, fancy outfits, and adult beverages. What I found waiting for me was an empty lobby of a standard multiplex theater operated by 3 board employees at the concession stand, and 1 teen volunteer at a folding table who had trouble finding my name on the filmmaker list because it was, of course, spelled wrong. The actual screening itself was worse. I sat in the back hoping to observe the audience, an audience which consisted of no more than 15 people, 3 of whom were fairly inebriated and possibly in the wrong auditorium, but nonetheless seated directly in front of me. When Dambulance finally played, one of the 3 loudly proclaimed, "Is this film actually serious?" before she and her group got up and walked out. It was a long drive home that night, literally and figuratively, but that was it. The end of my one big shot at a break, the end of my dream of a career in filmmaking, and the end of this story.
Aww. But Terrence is so talented in other ways. Let's give another round of applause for Terrence. So we have come to the final storyteller. I'm sad. I really hope that you all enjoyed your time here, and I really want to make sure that you're able to come back if you'd like. And I also just want to give a hearty welcome to our last and final storyteller. This one needs an introduction to this stage because he actually plays on it every Sunday in a group called Gemini Junior. You should come check it out every Sunday at Go Comedy. He is an improviser, sketch writer, actor, musician, Dungeons and Dragoner. I wrote this intro for you. I've known him for a long time. We actually used to take classes together. A teacher at the Go U, because actually if you ever want to take improv classes, there's classes here, so you should take them if you want to do that. And so you should welcome this person and this human and this amazing man. His name is Josh McDaniel.
Thank you, all of those things were correct.
So the Dungeons and Dragons.
Yes, that was also correct. Hi, everyone. My name's Josh McDaniel, and when I was thinking about detours in my life, I had like a pretty long list of things that I was trying to like fish out of, like what really stuck out, what caused a big old change that I did now that I look back now that I'm older, like really made me think differently about how I live my life. And the biggest one that I could come up with was the time when I first actually moved here to Michigan. I am not originally from Michigan. I am from a very rural place in Pennsylvania called Shippensburg, which no one here has heard of, and that's okay. I'm not going to go back there to live, and I didn't even stay there through my adult life. I went to school in North Carolina at the University of North Carolina, Asheville, where I spent 7 years of my life building not only like my schooling knowledge, but also like a career there. I was on track to become a special needs, we call it exceptional children in North Carolina, teacher. So I was going through the instructional assistant position and then was working my way in to become like an interim teacher, and then had landed actually a pretty interesting opportunity where the school district would pay for my grad school to become a full teacher, which when they told me that, I had experienced the North Carolina public school system for 3 years and was a little burned out. For those who are also public school teachers too, yes, you're doing more than one job and you're working 60 to 70 hours a week. So with that pressure, along with other pressures, like as I was getting older, and I was 26 at this point, I was really trying to decide what I was going to do with my life. I had also been a summer camp director for the longest time, so I decided, you know what? More fun. I'm going to do that. I'm going to spend all my time in the woods, making dumb games, running around, being silly, and I'm affecting children's lives. I'm going to say even more than I would be there, because that was more, it was honestly a lot more fun, but I can be honest with you now, it did not pay that well. Especially since you're only working for the summertime, and if you're working over the course of the year, that's actually even less than you would be getting if you're working in a public school. So anyone with dreams of that, Go ahead. You'll enjoy it while you're doing it until you can't anymore. To that point, I had made the decision to move to Ann Arbor because a friend of mine who I had been working with for a long time was deciding to move here as well, and she and I actually worked in the same camp space, so we were gonna, as a group of us, start a camp here, which we did. And I picked up my life completely from Asheville, left all my friends, left the career that I was going to have, left all my routines that I had painstakingly put together for 7 years, thinking that that's what I needed to do as an adult, and moved to Ann Arbor. When I got here, I didn't have any money. I didn't have a house to live in, so I just stayed at my friend's house, free of charge, which was awesome, but also not great for confidence as far as my journey was going on. At this point, I had realized that I wasn't going to be getting a lot of money working my camp director job until the summer hit again. So I thought, you know what, time to pursue that dream of being a comic book writer, which I had started the year prior. Actually, one of the other teachers, the student teachers at school I was working with, he and I had concocted a scheme whereby we would create a comic book and get as popular as Alan Moore. These were very drunk talks and very drunk product afterwards too. We did get it done, like in the time that we were trying to get it finished, but it's a comic book that we also ended up selling at the local comic book convention that year, September. But I'm not going to tell you the name of it because I don't want you to see my beginning writing chops, because I would have written it differently now that I'm older. But to that point, we had kind of become friends with the convention runners and the comic book store owner in Asheville. And that year that I moved to here, I found out he was going to do another convention. So I thought, you know what? I've only been here, like I just moved here in August. It's September. I'm going to go back and like grace everybody with my presence because, you know, I sold a comic book once. They need me. I'm not going to say they didn't need me there, but they didn't need me as much as I thought that they might need me. But going back was a detour in what had been a very hard decision to make, to leave a whole bunch of things that I thought were necessary for my life to change. Because at that point I'd been hitting not just a rut, but kind of like, well, here's the moral quandary. Is this where you're going to put roots down? Is this how you're going to live your life? Do you actually want to have to deal with everything here in the South as things have changed? And coming back was me reevaluating, kind of like, well, am I just going to go back to Asheville? Maybe I will. Maybe I already know what I know everything, as I know where the pizza stores are and everything is good here. So I pulled myself back up and decided, well, I have an orientation for a job that I auditioned for back here in Michigan. I gotta at least do that. If I'm making this choice to come back home and give up on everything, I'm doing it after I finish that. So I say goodbye to my friends again, who had all given me a huge like send-off, like, oh, we're never gonna see you again send-off, like parties in places where things were too loud. So I got a second one. I was like, okay, now, see you. Maybe again. Bye. And I made the trek back to Ann Arbor, which the drive between Ann Arbor and Asheville is 9 hours if you're booking it without stopping, pissing, or getting gas, and about 10 hours if you're being a smart driver. So, you know, I was taking the 10-hour plan. I made it through North Carolina. It's a pretty short jump to the Tennessee border. All good. Very short trip. Made it to the Kentucky border. Very, very short trip. No problems. I get 15 miles into Kentucky, and I just want to say right now, before you start judging me, I was never really a car person, or very good with the cars that I owned. And this was exactly how I had treated pretty much every other car that I'd ever had up to this point. You know how you have a car for long enough and you start feeling like the differences and the changes and how the car is moving. Almost like it's your own body. So you're like, ooh, that's not right. Well, I can hear that's changing. Why is that creaking? I didn't know that could creak. So this was kind of like one of those moments where I realized like, oh, you're gonna vomit soon. But not so soon that it's an emergency. You have plenty of time to get to a bathroom. You have time to choose which bathroom you want to get to. All the way up to the point where it became the time where it's like, no, we're doing it right now. Like, it's happening right now. I hope you made a good choice. And my car jumped straight from that point to the point where you are, laying your face on the toilet seat that everybody's pissed on, and it's really cool so you don't care, but like, you're starting to wonder if you'll ever be a person again. And we as humans can bounce back from that in various ways. Cars don't have that luxury. So I was stuck somewhere between a place called Corbin and a place called London, Kentucky. I know all the fathers in this audience are probably thinking, what the fuck did you do? You didn't say, yeah, no, I didn't check the oil. That's what I did, okay? I didn't check the oil pretty much ever, and because I was broke, I had never gotten my registration in North Carolina because North Carolina has inspection for cars. And when you're broke, it's hard to get that money to get the inspection, to bring it up to inspection, so all those things are fixed, and then you can have your registration. So I just drove the car. And I'm a different man now. I was younger then. I've only ever had one other instance where I killed a car like this since then. And the other incident was a coolant-related incident, but that's not important. The point is, my actual dad, had planned for this contingency and had me get a AAA roadside assistance membership well before this happened. I'm right now a 19-year member of the AAA roadside assistance program. Can't give enough props to it. My dad knew this was going to happen, and like by this point I'd already had it for 9 years. I was very used to using it. I called the AAA roadside assistance, and the cool thing about AAA is, and while I'll back them, even if people are like, I don't like it, it's like, well, did they ever do this for you? I told the lady on the phone, hey, I don't have a registration on this car. And she went, oh, okay, well, let's try to get the truck there before the cops get there. Oh, thank you, great. So yeah, they don't give a shit what car they're towing as long as you're paying them. So I waited for a little bit. It only took a little under an hour. The tow guy got there, and it was at this point I was kind of like sinking, and it's like, I'm in Kentucky. I'm from a rural place, so this isn't new to me, but now I'm starting to wonder if my ruralisms are going to translate to the ruralisms of this area. And the guy pulls up, he gets out of the car, he's a little bit shorter than me, round guy, no facial hair, but he's the kind of guy who looks good with little facial hair. He was rocking it really well. And pretty amicable, which is good for me. Get in the truck with him, he gets my car, like all hitched up. We start having a conversation. I don't remember what I said. I just do remember that he laughed in a way that was like, happy, keep talking kind of laugh. So I thought, oh, good for me too. He gave me the option of either coming to his, or dropping me off at the rest stop that had a Burger King, or coming to his shop/home/compound to wait for him to fix my car. So I chose the Burger King. They have Whoppers there, and I was very hungry, and I didn't know what he had, and I didn't want to judge him for it. So I wait about an hour, I eat my Whopper, I get a call back from him, and he says, so this isn't good, pal. Your cylinders, you fused the pistons into the cylinders. This engine is dead. The car turned off because it was saving your life. It should have exploded. You're very lucky. So at this point, I only have a choice. I have two choices. I can either pay to get a new engine, or I can scrap the car. And for those of you who are like thinking, what about his AAA his membership? Which I'll tell you right now, the premier AAA membership only gives you 200 miles of towage in any direction. I have the Plus version, it's still very respectable, but only 100 miles. The classic version is 5. Don't buy that. It's a waste of time. But Ann Arbor was still 6 hours away, which is way more than 100 hours. So there would be no way that I was going to get up enough money to do either the engine or the tow to get it all the way back home. So I elected to scrap the car with him. And luckily I had friends who lived in Cincinnati who I had known from college, who were willing to come pick me up, bring me to Cincinnati, so I could stay at their house, get a rental the next day. So that was the good part. The weird part was that they were both people that I'd had romantic relationships with, and they were married now, so I was out of the picture. But good for the great hearts. They came and they dropped everything and picked me up. Also, they're not married anymore, but they're still my friends. So they dropped everything, came pick me up. And when they got me at the Burger King, we went up to this guy's shop/home/compound/scrapyard. And I have to say, it was the most picturesque, like, little slice of Appalachia that I'd ever seen. And I'm not being facetious about it. It was beautiful. This dude had a big old, like, cut of land with 2 trailers that he had cobbled into a house, which, coming from where I grew up, is I'm very used to it. It's like, yeah, that's how some of our houses were. So I felt very comfortable the whole time. To say that he had a lot of space was also like saying a lot, because as we pulled up and got out of the car, 4 of his children came from like different directions out of like the various wooded places, and his wife came out with a baby, so I felt very welcome. And signed over the title to him, and he gave me $250, which is fine. And I got all my stuff out of my car, put it in my friends Jay and Sable's car, and we headed back to Cincinnati. I wasn't expecting at all for my car to be broken, and I know all of you are going like, well, you should have, dummy. That is how you kill a car. Again, I've only killed 3 cars. That's way less than a lot of people, I presume. But I wasn't expecting to not only have to look my choice in the face of like, just moving on, like not leaving the friendships, but moving on to new friendships, moving on to new career choices, moving on to new relationships, and just newness as a whole. And then being shown like, here's this like 2 relationships that you were still thinking about the most, and now you just have to deal with them. We ended up talking for a long time in the car, going over everyone's part in the story that happened while we were still in college. And what I wasn't expecting was for all of us to be completely forgiving of it. In fact, I hadn't even considered forgiving myself for like leaving and all of these other parts of it. And I didn't expect to get like an apology for like things. And it put things into perspective for me in a way that just at that point hadn't happened yet, like as far as growing up goes. That no matter like where you are at any given point, it's not necessarily where you're going to be. But it is where you've been, and it's worth looking at, because it's going to look right back at you. And take those moments whenever it's looking back at you with kindness to heart, because there's a lot of times when they look back and they're screaming at you. I did make it to that orientation. I didn't get a new car for 6 months. But I did end up starting a new set of careers here in Michigan, where I have now been for almost 10 years. And if I happen to leave again, that's where I'll be. But part of me will still be here. Thank you.
Thank you for Josh. Thank you for all of our other storytellers. Let's see if I can remember. Hold on. Thank you to Terrence. Thank you to Josh, the other Josh. Thank you to Kevin. Thank you to Sarah. Thank you to Finn. Thank you to Maxie. Thank you to Ted. Thank you to Paul. Everybody? Okay. Thank you so much. And thank you to the audience. You guys are fantastic. We are going to take one little photo of all of us on stage. So storytellers, please come up here. And please just give one more say thank you applause to them. Thank you so much.